to the broken body.
Hello and welcome to the Fitz and Healthy podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauren Fitzgerald, and today I have a guest that I am so excited to interview. I'm trying not to geek out. I don't remember the last time I was this excited. It's been a while, but this gentleman here, I have so much respect for. So I typically don't do a formal introduction, but this guy, he deserves a formal introduction because I want you to understand how educated and smart and life experienced this man is. So Darin Olien. So let me just first of all start off with the official introduction. So he is widely recognized for the exotic superfood hunter that he is, supplement formulator, author of a book called SuperLife, which is right here, and I highly recommend. I've been recommending it since I read it a while back. The SuperLife is the 5 fixes that will keep you healthy, fit, and eternally awesome. An upcoming TV host and environmental activist who travels the planet discovering new and underutilized exotic foods and medicinal plants. For the last 15 years, he's worked closely with international suppliers, indigenous farmers, and collectors all over the world to support high-quality, fair trade superfoods and herbs in the marketplace. Not only all of that, but he is very involved with organizations like raincatcher.org, which he talks about in his book, that has brought good water to places that struggle with having good water that's drinkable in many places like Africa. And then another thing is pretty cool is that he is someone that I look up to because he's turned something disastrous, like losing his home in Malibu from the wildfires. And he's actually going to be using it to show people how he can bring back to life with a sustainable way his home that he lost in a wildfire. And he's doing it via a Netflix documentary. So, I mean, you're like all over the place. And I didn't even read half of the stuff. So I appreciate you so much for being here, Darin. You are you're one of my top 3 people that I wanted to interview. So I am super excited about having you here today.
Oh, right on. Well, I'm stoked to share what I can and to help facilitate any information that people may want. And I love to dive deep, and especially I'm excited with you too, because being a professional like you are, a doctor, we can explore.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. So as I was telling you before we started officially recording, I have a little, liability disclaimer at the end of all my podcasts that basically states that I am a medical doctor, but not the listener's medical doctor, all of the medical mumbo jumbo. But I want to specifically start this conversation off by telling people that, yes, I'm a medical doctor, but I am not anyone's medical doctor that is listening here. He is not a medical doctor, but he has so much life experience. He has his master's and he has 15 plus years of traveling literally all over the world. He's been called the Indiana Jones of superfoods, and that's legit who he is. So we are going to be talking about how you can heal the body. But at the end of the day, what I want you to do is I want you to take this information, and I would love for you to collaborate with a doctor that is functionally medicine trained. So that might be a naturopath, that might be an MD that has that functional medicine training. But functional medicine doctors and integrative medicine doctors are the ones that will approach it from a natural approach first. And then the Western medicine, is for all of the people that they want the magic pill and they want to be on prescription drugs their whole life. So this is not for those people. This is for people that really do want to learn how to make their health better on their own and not be on prescription drugs the rest of their life potentially. So that being said, I'm going to start out by just stating this, that I think a lot of Beachbody coaches won't say out loud, and maybe they don't even realize, but as a Beachbody coach, so I'm a medical doctor and a Beachbody coach, I feel like the things that make Beachbody the most amazing company when it comes to health and fitness and nutrition are the ones most underutilized, because everyone always thinks about the workout programs, but I don't think, and I love the workout programs. But I don't think that that's the best thing that Beachbody has to offer by any means. And it wasn't until I started to learn about Shakeology specifically that it made me start opening my mind to, okay, maybe this company is a little bit different than all of the other ones that I have learned about, right? So let's start off with your own personal journey. Where did you get, and I know the answer to this, but the audience doesn't.
Yeah, how did I get into this thing,
Yeah.
and how did I end up running around the planet? Well, I think it was first off, it was innocently, but directed via through some hardship. In undergrad, playing college football, I got hurt, and then it kind of woke me up to more kind of life, really, because I was like, well, what am I studying? I don't really care about business for business sake. So I changed my entire major to physiology, kinesiology, nutrition, all of that stuff. And I switched schools. And then once I started learning a little bit about really this, because number one, I needed to know, and I wanted to know about my body that wasn't healing based on the injury. So it just finally, the light bulb went off, and I'm like, well, learn about it. And the more I learned, as you know, you learn about the body, and you're just humbled with the miraculousness of what's going on from a cellular level all the way to the macro level, and how the infinite amount of communicative ability and regeneration ability of the body. You just come to just I come to just drop down on my knees, humbled by this miraculous kind of, orchestration that we get to inhabit for a little bit. So once that started kind of becoming professionally, just like, and educationally, and I didn't know which direction I was going to go. I really loved movement. After I studied with a physiologist after college and understanding biomechanics and movement, I actually had a little stint at a veterinarian clinic where I'd watch dogs move and help the vet understand where compensations are. So I just love that whole thing. And then I started digging into nutrition, and I'd work with a doctor that would go to the University of Colorado and drop off papers. And that was kind of my first, like, seeing the research in plants and medicine, and as simple as, reading one of the first articles. I remember reading an article on cinnamon as it relates to diabetes. And and its profound effect on blood sugar regulation. And so it just started opening up this world. And then when I started digging into food systems and what was in supplements, then the more I'd pull that string, the more I was disappointed kind of around every corner. I'd be like, wow, this is marketed as a really good product. But largely, the more I learned, the more I'd realize where they made compensation.
They cut corners all the time.
Exactly, and I was just kind of like, well, why did they do that?
Yeah, no, I always say that the supplement industry is like the wild, wild west, and 90, probably 8% of companies don't have standards and cut corners, and it's all about profit margins. Exactly.
And listen, you have to have as a pillar or a spoke in the wheel, you have to be a sustainable company. It has to be sustainable. You have to make profit in order to sustain. So of course that's a cog in the wheel, but it is by no means the only one. And so I kept coming to that question of, like, why are they doing that? And so it finally just was, the other bell went off. I'm like, oh, because I'm seeing it, because I can see it.
Right.
And so if I can see it based on what I know, then what can I do about it?
Right.
And then I started playing, and then I started formulating, and then I started looking at alchemies of how to use things. And then the more I did that, and I experimented for years, and the more I realized, the more I did that, then I was like, wow, if I really am going to understand this, I actually have to go meet the farmers. I have to know how the process is, because one material showing up with a piece of paper attached to it, identifying the botanical, tells you nothing about how it was grown, tells you nothing about who was growing it, tells nothing about what was in the soil, what environments around it, tells nothing about the process that that compound or medicinal plant or food is going through to preserve that which it's being sought out for anyway.
Right. If you're even getting the good stuff from it that it's advertised for.
Exactly. And so that led me to bust out and show up. I looked at Himalayan crystal salt in 2003 and 4 in India. And then, of course, I went to Peru and I was developing relationships. And that's where I started going, wow, this treasure chest that kind of no one knows about. I went there for a couple of resources to see who was growing and how they were growing, and I ended up with a list of 100 other botanicals that I really didn't know much about, and that started the curiosity, the passion, the connection. It's never been without connection for me. So it's always been about that farmer, that land, that culture, that botanical, truly, how is it being used? And then the journey of it back to the people, so it wasn't a marketing story, that it was actually doing the thing, the miraculous thing that this plant has in its ultimate alchemy between us and them, the plant world. Which is, if you think about it, you're like, wait a minute. We have shown up on this planet and we grab these botanicals. Those are literally our medicines. And then we're creating a bunch of food in labs and stuff. And it was like, wow, we're insane human beings when we already have the answers here.
Well, there was one part in, I believe it was chapter 10 or chapter 11 of SuperLife, that you were talking about moringa, and you were talking about the fact that it grows in all of the places of the world that they don't have access to Western medicine and prescription drugs. And the moringa tree, correct me if I'm wrong, is the tree called the vitamin tree, or the never die tree, because locals know the medicinal powers of this plant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great example, which is why I give the example all the time. And I don't think it's even solved to this day. I've done pilot studies with the Navajo Nation in the Four Corners area and in Arizona, proving that you can grow moringa and process it correctly. And I did tests where the leading retail and wholesale brands were 3 times less nutrient valued than the one that I did, and I didn't have the bandwidth to continue, but it's really kind of that times hundreds and hundreds of botanicals that you're being marketed to all the time, and people are so disconnected from the who, from the how, and the what these botanicals truly are, and it's humbling. Still to this day, you think you have something solved, and next thing you know, it's not. And you're in a third world country, and it takes a lot of infrastructure, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of people that are aligned with you, and that doesn't always work. And you can't do it with all of the botanicals that you may want to. It's just, so it's a very, very challenging world. It's not a sexy world. It's like, once you get, maybe my superfood hunting, listen, I never gave myself that title. I think it was a Business Week article. I think it was one of the first ones that said it, and it just stuck because it's very easy to say, like, what do you do? I superfood hunt. People go, what? And
title though, right?
Yeah. So it's just, again, so back to the story, it's really was about my small town roots of my families were farmers. My dad was an ag professor at the University of Minnesota. Like, it's just it. And being from Minnesota, I just wanted to know the people that I was dealing with.
Right.
You know, just straight up. You know, I don't want to just buy something. I want to know what's happening, and
Right.
I want to know who's doing it. And that was the innocence. When I say the innocence of this, how this journey began, and how it continues, and has other tentacles, which is why I've gotten into the environmental side of myself and supporting those things, because you see things that you wouldn't have seen. You've been exposed to things and people and situations that from our perspective can have solutions for problems, but aren't. And so it's gotten me involved in just doing the right thing when I can. And so, I will tell you that when I read your book the first time, and I've read your book 3 times, because it's one of those that you really do. Like, I think that every person that is a Beachbody coach needs to read your book. For one, it gives, if you don't already have a belief in what the company of Beachbody stands for, reading the part that you talk about it, and you talk about it in 1 chapter, but reading what you had to say, it just confirms everything that this company is not about just the profit margin. They actually care about the health of the individual and reversing the health crisis that our world is facing. And I love the fact that you said Carl Daikeler wouldn't cut corners, and he wouldn't compromise on the quality, and he was going to make sure that everything that you wanted to be in the product was going to happen without any shortcomings. Yeah, and that was really set up by Isabel. Obviously, she was with Carl, and by her commitment set the stage for me to come in, because she had already gotten that deal set with Carl. Right. Like, for people that don't know, Isabel Daikeler is, when y'all met, she was just the girlfriend of Carl Daikeler, but Carl Daikeler is the CEO of Beachbody. They have now been married for many years, but her story is funny, because you hear her talking about the fact that when he first asked her, she said no, because she had been asked by many companies, but they weren't willing to have the same standards. And she said that this could end our relationship forever if you aren't willing to do what I ask as far as quality. So I loved hearing that. Yeah, even to this day. Yeah. Like, even to this day, if you get so successful now, and all of a sudden you have to compromise, because we're buying volumes of botanicals, and sometimes we have to go sideways because a third world country can't keep up. A company is not willing to evolve with us. Like, it's happened several times with a product that's so advanced in how many botanicals it has, but every time it's never going down for a reason of profit. It's only shifting and improving when we absolutely can. And it's a moving evolution. Like, when something comes online in an efficacy and a volume that we want. So chaga mushrooms was, back when I started playing around with the formula, chaga wasn't sustainable. It was in the wild and nearly impossible. And as the market understood now how to propagate naturally chaga mushrooms and understand it, then you're like, oh wow, it's time, and now we can implement this back into and with Shakeology. So it's, and Moringa, the same thing. Like, we found a decent source, and one that we were happy with all the other brown, yellow crap out there. It's that kind of thing. So it came from the top, and Isabel massaged Carl's business acumen into our world. And now that really the synergy between Carl, Isabel, and I was really set. And we're like, okay, we know each other's lane. We know what we can do. Right. And we did it even in the face of many other people at the company, top people at the company, not believing that this was a good choice.
Right.
So,
right. Well, I think that, you don't know my own story, but I've always been in health and fitness. I was a group instructor since I was 16. So exercise has always been part of my life. But when I got to my mid 30s, that was when I realized that the whole time, because people, whether it was my patients when I was practicing medicine or coworkers or, people in the OR came to me and asked for advice. And more times than not, when I didn't see them changing results, I just thought that they were lazy or not doing what I asked them. But when I know what I am doing, I was following all of the rules that I learned in med school, which is zero nutrition. We're taught that if a person has high cholesterol, you tell them a low-fat diet, and that's about it, and which we all know is crap now. But I knew that I was exercising a ton. I was eating low-fat and eating what I thought was healthy. And when I knew my N of 1, it was not working. That was when I started to really learn how food is actual medicine. And so not once did I ever get taught that processed food changes your hormones and changes the neurochemical signals in your brain and your gut biome. And we were not taught that in medical school. And so all of a sudden now, once I start to learn about these superfoods, like medicinal mushrooms, of course, I'd never learned about those in medical school. Chaga, the moment I started to learn about chaga, I'm like, oh, I need some of that. Give me some.
Yeah.
So when you guys added it to the formulation of Shakeology, that made me super happy. But who I want to speak to first is the coaches that are in the network, because I truly believe that if they understood how magical this product alone, and we're just talking about Shakeology, we can touch on the Ultimate Reset because the products in that system are so amazing too. But I want to speak to the coaches, because I believe that we focus too much on the exercise programs. And in reality, I believe that 80% of a person's success is from our food and nutrition.
If not more.
Yeah. No, I always say 80 to 85, maybe 90.
Yeah.
Exercise is important, but truly it's what you eat. So speak to the coaches that have this tool that they don't utilize at all to help change people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, you set it up in terms of that, because it really is. If you go back to any indigenous culture that is sustained and low disease, they're moving for sure. They're moving, but they're not, hit programs. They're not intensity. They're not kind of prescriptive in that thing. They're just moving around. And then if you dig into that, even from the blue zones around the planet to indigenous cultures throughout the Amazon and Ecuador and things like that, you largely they're 60 to 70% carbohydrates, and obviously they're foraging most of their food. So what does that say about the food selection? Obviously, and also they're not overly clean, meaning that they're in the dirt. So
right.
you're stimulating the microbiome, you're stimulating the exposure, you're actually giving in a good way. You're giving your immune system something to do. So anyway, but so the coaches themselves, I mean, we really have forged this formula from around the world, and it isn't my brilliance. It isn't Isabel's brilliance. It's really just the observational understanding that if you're willing to observe that which works for millennia, for tens of thousands of years, from, there are many compounds in there from traditional Chinese medicine, many compounds in there from Ayurveda. These are, Ayurveda is, some say 20 to 40,000 years old.
Right.
So start doing the math. If we've been here and we've created the AMA in the last 100, 125, 150 years.
Don't get me started.
And we've taken the idea of you're catching something and you need to, apply drugs in order, that without opening up that kind of worms. Then what you've done is you've severely shut off your observational senses to the environment, which I believe is fatally killing us. It's a fatal convenience that in our modern day world, we're shut off to all of our senses that tell us what to do. And we have to actually relearn them again. So all of these botanicals from the beautiful moringa that you brought up, and the adaptogenic herbs, the schizandra, the ashwagandha, the maca, the cordyceps, the reishi, the chaga. I mean, these things are they are in the ancient line of human use, way beyond the very quick thinking that we know what they are, how to use them, all that stuff. But the culture has already shown us, the people have already shown us. So, and that one of my earliest teachers outside of the box of normal education and into the functional understanding of health was like, if it's not observed in nature, then ultimately it's going to create problems with an exponential order of issues. So you go further and deeper away from that which you're trying to do, creating unknown consequences. And look around. We are absolutely 100% flying down that road with reckless abandon, giving our trust over to all kinds of people. And so, yeah, okay, you can look back at you can then go, people say, well, Darin, I like to eat whole food, and you're talking about whole food. Yeah, I get that, but we're not foraging. We're not out in it. We're in a modern day world where we need to, just in formulating, one of the first questions I ask is, okay, we're in a modern day situation. What do we need that we're not getting?
Right.
And so I go right to some of the greatest botanicals in the world, and they're in the formula in a way that they can be preserved. And so again, if you go back to how is chaga found in nature? How is moringa found in nature? And then what are the botanicals that we know of, or the compounds within that botanical that are synergistic and active, that have been shown to, so this is then where the science comes in our modern day world. Like, okay, so if we're processing said superfood, then what are the compounds that need to be preserved in our process? Right. So how is it grown? What standards is the growing process under? What is the cultivation process? What is the timing of how you're going to clean and dry in a temperature that's not going to just annihilate the botanical and then just undercut the very thing that you're trying to do? And that is at the core of us, especially Isabel and I, at the core of us is we want health for people. For me, I want health for people, not just so people can run around and say I lost a bunch of weight.
No,
it's a lot deeper than that, because I want health for me so I can just live my life like on a high level, do everything that I want to do without having to turn around and go, why is my body not coming with me? Or I don't have any energy, or I don't have enough strength to climb a mountain, or help my friend to get his car unstuck.
And most people think that that's a normal process of aging, and it's not.
Right.
It's not if you have spent your life feeding your body with good fuel from nature instead of fake foods from big food companies.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of amazing scientists and people talking about just, the real source of longevity. And, I've got to spend time with Dr. Walter Longo and Dr. Pez, the longevity specialists, the top researchers in the world on longevity. And you come to realize there's some very basic things. It's not rocket science. No. It's pretty simple. And so again, we cultivated and forged this formula out of the the observation of what the cultures have been using and how they've been using them to understand those botanicals, to where, okay, now in this case with Beachbody backing us with the unsexy side of spending millions of dollars, sending our people around the globe to observe, to audit, to check, to upgrade, to infuse greater knowledge.
And I want to make sure people understand that most companies don't do that. Most companies go to a third-party buyer, a broker, and that is where the wild west of the supplement industry comes. Because you don't know where that ingredient has come from, the quality, if there's rat poop in the factory that it was made in, there's no quality control assurance. And we have 70 plus superfood ingredients and we don't have a broker for any of them. We are the middleman. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the reality is sometimes you've had companies that have done it right. Like I know several owners of companies that have spent, sometimes you double down on hey, I really believe that this is going to happen. So they've actually stepped in and already done the work. And that's rare.
Very rare.
It happens. And then you're like, okay, there's a few people in the industry that I'm like, okay, I know these guys.
Right.
I know what they're doing. I know what they're dedicated to. And then, but of course they're open and transparent. So then, yes, we get parlay to all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, the reality is we have access to all of our botanicals, meaning that we have to, regardless of where it is and what the relationship is, we have to have access to the chain. And many companies don't want to do that. And then, they're brokers, and most companies, I mean, we've had other companies come in and basically use our name to some of these suppliers and say, hey, can you recreate this formula for us? Right. Because we want to sell it. And, so in that instance, can you recreate this formula? Yeah, pretty easily if you're a business. But again, you're just grabbing from these brokers, and it takes them a couple weeks to throw that formula together. But there's no deep understanding of any of the active compounds. And you're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of compounds that could be, hundreds in one product.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
wasn't it the goji berry, the difference of 4 degrees in the drying process of the goji berry? It either went rancid or it was usable. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it very well could be. I mean, it depends on what presentation you're trying to get it into, as opposed to drying it as a whole. And also when you're picking, there's a if you can go pretty deep on this, there's a pulsation even with the earth. There's a time with the plant itself that's pulling more nutrients up at certain times of the day. I mean, it's really, really an incredible understanding of this relationship when you really dive into it. But yeah, there's every ingredient in the formula has a completely different playbook in terms of what does it have in it, how does it grow, how do we preserve it, how do we do it safely, do we have enough of it, how do we grow it directly, it's all of these things create a nightmare for our quality control, and
99% of companies won't go to the links that we do to make sure that we get the product that we say is on the bag.
Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't make sense to me, because if you're doubling down on building a business, why wouldn't you want to know everything that's going on? It just doesn't make sense. And it was tough in the beginning. Like I remember formulating and Carl would be like, why is this taking so long? And like it's a really difficult, long process with a lot of things. And there's a lot going on. And then I'd also follow that up as like, hey, we need to do this with the farmers and da-da-da. And he's like, whoa. Can we just see, like, can we just see what we can do here? I haven't even got my head around marketing this.
Right.
And so that's been a slow feed of like, okay, really understanding now every chance Carl gets, he likes to tell part of that story and just like, this is a proud thing for us as a company that, we have very high standards. We fail most of the audits that we do initially with any of the suppliers that we're trying to get from, because ultimately we have to find a place in country that has to process said superfood. So you have to create a standard, like one processing facility that processes a few things for us in Peru, I've known for 12 years.
Right.
And he's evolved with us. He's one of those ones who's created a whole new facility and top notch in Peru. And it's like, and then several farmers along the way, their lives have changed because of this stuff. And those are very sweet and precious stories. So, that's behind the scene of, and one thing that I wish, we could visibly show a little more besides that one video that we created a decade ago.
Right.
But these are real people, the real people and real lands, and we create security for them, because that security every time, we always say vote with your dollars, right? So every choice you make, from your deodorants to shampoos to floor cleaners to pillows to utensils to any food you buy, any supplement, you're taking your hard-earned money and you're saying, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to support the whole chain of that company.
Yeah.
So you have to think you're like, okay, well, I'm buying this because it's cheap, and it's coming from some cheap company that really doesn't give a shit about you and is doing everything the opposite of what we just talked about before. And that is, I'm going to cut corners.
Yep.
I am going to put chemicals in here. I am going to make a beautiful psychological twisting marketing story to manipulate you. Yep. And you're taking your money that you've worked hard at and saying, yes, I support that company. When you have something like this, you're like, yes, I'm supporting botanical, sustainably harvested botanicals around the world. I'm supporting people. I'm supporting farmers. There's real people that have had to go out and collect and farm and procure. And that security is a job. Right. It's a job security for those people, real people working daily to make sure that those botanicals are in that bag. So it's a dimensional thing. And it's something that I wish that was more of a thought in people's consciousness. However, I do understand that, hey, this has to make me feel good. We're all, this has to benefit me. I don't want to just throw away money to support something in some far off land. But obviously we threw the greatest botanicals in the world in a bag. So it's going to support you, and it's also supporting the people that are doing it.
This is a good opportunity to ask the common question: why do we not have the label organic or non-GMO on the bag?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the organic is a when we've set the standard ourselves of what is quality to us, what won't we accept? We don't accept any GMO ingredients. We don't accept pesticides and herbicides. So we've set our standards. These are mandated within our R&D and quality assurance. So that is already out there. Organic certification is absolutely there for a very good reason. And that is an organization that is doing something so that you don't have to organize it based on a quality standard.
Right.
So as an industry, if you see an organic label, you're like, okay, well, they fit this system. Well, not every company that's selling organic gummy bears can afford to set up the protocol that is, as high or higher than organic standard, and then have a quality control. They're just trying to sell vitamin induced gummy bears.
Right.
So we, luckily, we've been successful, and Carl's, had a successful company before and now during, and he's always been able to put money back in, which has allowed us to create standardization of our quality control. So we don't accept those things in the GMOs and the pesticides and the herbicides. We don't accept that. Plus we're auditing, we're visualizing, we're doing those things, we're inspecting facilities, we're so we're in a nutshell, we're beyond what organic. And the other thing that I can speak to probably more than anybody is when you're in an indigenous situation, when you're in a third world country, when you're in a pristine area that's foraging schizandra for us, or picking ashwagandha and astragalus and whatever else, there is no use. They're not using pesticides, herbicides. We wouldn't be there if they were, so they're not using it. And if we said, hey, listen, we want to make all this organic, largely that process doesn't improve the quality. It only puts standards that we already have had set up for the farmers to do, which largely is a burden for them, and they have to actually pay more money to cultivate and to grow. So I'm not saying that it's not a good thing. And in an ideal world, if we could some things are really difficult to certify organic. When you have a landmass issue, you have a approximation issue, you have a jungle issue, you have a variety of things. To impose organic certification is kind of like, I've looked at their faces and they're like, really? Well,
that's what we
are.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But so it would be something that ultimately we would have to impose that upon them, and largely it would just drive up the cost of a lot of things.
Right.
Who knows what can happen in the future as we continue to evolve and all of that thing. And I think, listen, just from a marketing perspective, yeah, okay, it has an organic certification. You don't have to have this conversation with me.
Right.
Okay, fine. But we've busted our ass to make sure that product is of high quality.
Right.
We've set our own standards, and we're trying to get it as cost effective as possible in the ecosystem that is Beachbody. So
that brings up two really good questions, because one, because of course the labeling, the marketing of food companies is so they're sneaky brilliant, because they can sell you on, well, organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, but you turn it around, you look at ingredients, and there are ingredients that are not good for you, right? But that leads me to my first question. Rumor is that right now we do not have a gluten-free stamp on either the plant-based or the whey-based. I have tons of clients and coaches that have legit celiacs that do just fine with both versions of Shakeology. But rumor is that we are about to make it officially gluten-free. Can you speak on that rumor by any chance?
I don't know if you're going to get me in trouble here. I don't know. I don't know what I can say and I can't say at this point, but I can confirm that we're making some adjustments to better this conversation.
Good, because a lot of people that follow me are people that are grain-free or paleo, or to stay away from the grains. So when I heard that rumor, I was hoping that it would be true.
Where did you hear the rumor from?
A little birdie told me. I can't tell. Okay. I don't want to get in trouble.
Right. Well, then if you heard it from but listen, we're listening. we're listening, and moving this is a ocean tanker of a formula.
It is.
So any shift, any change, you have an alchemy shift. So sometimes you have to adjust other things. You have in this instance, you have amino acids shifting around. So you have to balance that out and bring up other levels of something. You have to then check volumes of commitments that you've made in those volumes of procuring enough supply. I mean, it's just this massive undertaking. Well, so it doesn't happen overnight, but
just like when you guys switched and you took out agave and put in organic cane sugar. So can you speak to that? Because that is okay. It's because a lot of people that follow me are fans of higher fat, lower carbohydrate lifestyle. And when that was added, everyone was just getting their panties in a wad. Can you just please speak on that just briefly? I know that you've spoken on it multiple times, but people need to hear this and understand this.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have a no fear with carbohydrates myself.
Okay.
And I think everyone should have a no fear about macronutrients. Okay. You can decide whatever you want. Doesn't matter to me. You don't have to eat how I eat. You can eat paleo and keto, whatever makes you happy.
Right.
So on that, listen, the sugar thing and the taste thing is the biggest challenge in formulation with Shakeology, bar none. Yeah. It is so bloody difficult to formulate something that tastes remotely good when you have so many botanicals that are gnarly and bitter and pungent and sour. And
I've tried to take chaga just by itself. It's not good.
Yeah, I've grown to love it. But
have you? Okay.
I love it so much. I named my dog Chaga.
I knew you named your dog Chaga. I love that. It's an amazing superfood for sure.
Yeah. So you have a challenge with just the botanicals and trying to make it so that people will consume them that are not used to consuming something like that and are sensitive to flavors.
Right.
So obviously our flavor system we're incredibly proud of. So flavoring itself, water extracted, no chemicals, and that's a whole nother amazing conversation of quality control way beyond just a label of natural flavors. Like we are infinitely better and greater in we've sat down with our flavor companies. Isabel and I have just hammered, and I've been
because that was going to be another question. Because I definitely, the people that are really nitpicky about ingredients, when they see natural flavors, they definitely, so finish your thought and then go to that next.
Yeah. So the sugar side of it, we've originally, so you can only use in creating a good taste.
Yeah.
You can't, with this flavor, I've spent too many times in a lab coat in the labs for too long. There's all these nuances within flavor and sweetness. Yep. So you have beautiful things like lohan gao, called common name monk fruit, right? Lohan gao is traditional Chinese medicine. It's an herb that's been used for
thousands of years,
diabetic friendly, and helps some absorption of some other nutrients. And then you have so you have to use a little bit of that, but if you use too much, it throws things off, it blows it out, it doesn't taste good, it tastes all these things can happen when you're trying to overpower all of the botanicals. So it's like you got to use just enough, and it starts the sweet cascade, and then you're bringing in advanced concoctions of stevia, right? Ones that they've been look so good, they've done so well at not allowing for that natural stevia aftertaste, and so then you have this little stevia action to kind of help cover some other ones. But then you're sitting there and you're not quite there. Okay. You're not quite at this place. And so originally we had coconut flower nectar. So very good friends of mine cultivating coconut flower nectar out of Indonesia, to which I've been there several times. And the expansion of us at that trajectory, they couldn't keep up with our demand.
Wow.
So that was one of those ones we were like, uh-oh, we're seeing the writing on the wall. Yep. We got to move sideways and move sideways quick.
Right.
Because this is a big ingredient in terms of people are not going to drink it.
Yeah.
So when you have a sugar type thing, obviously I'm reaching for sugars that are contributive in terms of what else they can do. So they're, coconut flower nectar, organic cane sugar, they're bringing a host of minerals and things and no chemicals.
Right.
So when we switched from organic sugar, then we went to agave, and we were just sick of, really, it just came down to the agave process, and that company, they just weren't stepping up.
Gotcha.
To the places. So then we're like, okay, we've looked at alternative sugars and sweeteners and all kinds of things. You can, xylitol for a long time and all these sugar alcohols, but then you have digestive issues. Yep. One of my favorites is Yacon syrup that we crystallized. And it didn't quite get there because it's something happens. It's called a glass transition that happens with sugars when they can't stabilize enough with ambient temperature, and so it would shift into this glass transition. And what would happen? It was clump everything up, and so so it's all of this stuff that you're looking at. So we were very happy with the organic sugar, and at the end of the day, Emily, listen, if someone's in ketosis and all of that stuff, then whatever. I don't know their overall, whatever that person is doing in their carb load. So you have to look at it like, okay, you're getting a few grams of sugar in this serving. So look at it from the whole perspective. A few grams of sugar is doing nothing unless you're having 100 grams of carbs, and that's kicking you out of keto. So then if you take a little extra or whatever your deal is, the gift of the few grams of sugar compared to the delivery of the botanicals is just like annihilating any kind of story that holds any cup of water, I think. And so again, one of the hardest things in the world, believe me, probably not the world, but a very difficult thing to do is formulate for a mass population. Yeah. When we're all individuals, we're all biochemically individual at different states and different places and different stress levels and undernourished and under whatever. Yep. It's nearly impossible. So you're having to do all of this empirical data research on efficacy and compound understanding and then all of a sudden, like, okay, we're good with the botanicals, but if no one's going to choke this thing down. Right.
If it doesn't taste good, it's not going to be utilized. Bottom line.
So the amount of sugar that's in there is negligible in anyone's sphere. Now, if they're consuming 250 grams of sugar a day from shitty sources,
exactly,
and then they're already, their adrenals are shot, they're already, the body internally stressed out,
insulin resistance is going.
Exactly. Yep. So then you're already in a wildfire that you haven't even begun to put out. And so, it's really a perspective thing of like, if people are hung up on that, it just like, I agree.
It's a common question that a lot of Beachbody coaches get. So since we're talking about macronutrients of carbohydrates, I want to switch to protein because that is a common thing that we get. And anytime someone tells me, I already have a protein shake, I will come back with the clever, and I did not come up with this. I have to give Shay Stanford a shout out for this, but she asked, are you protein deficient? Because a majority of people aren't protein deficient, they're nutrient deficient. And that's what Shakeology is for, right? And when the part in the book where you talk about protein and you talk about the fact you have not actually always been vegan, this has been in your recent past. And I don't know how long ago you became
11 years.
Okay. So you talk about how much protein we need. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, the cool thing about protein, what I was discovering is that when I first did it, it was more of research.
Right.
When it came out of, when it further developed out of the morality, the environmental, that matured and aligns with my heart, my soul, my purpose, my everything. So, but it didn't come out of that. They came out of the athlete in me was researching and looking and then I was like, I started to see these amino acid uptake reuse mechanisms. And I was like, wait, what? Like, okay, well, that makes sense.
My whey protein is a waste?
Yeah.
I'm sure you drank whey protein. You were an athlete, right?
Of course.
Absolutely.
What are you doing
It probably gave you gas like the rest of us, right?
I had to, in my dorm room, I had to shut the door. Like, it was a bad situation. Cybergenics was one of the first.
Oh yeah.
Like in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So then I started seeing like, wow, so it makes sense. Protein is in the environment, but in concentrations, very difficult. It takes a lot of energy to get a concentrated form of protein, whether it's hunting something or whatever. It's a lot of effort.
Right.
So it makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. If a cell dies and it breaks apart, the body metabolizes breaks apart and then says, well, why do I need amino acids to build something else. Why not reuse it? Right. So there was this reused aspect of mechanism that I was like, wow. So that's another part of the equation that I wasn't perceiving. So it's not just this macro view of the macronutrients.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'm an athlete. So I need,
lots of protein.
150 grams, 200 grams a day. And then you're like, well, then if you're looking at the stress that the amount of protein puts on your system, on your kidneys, on your digestive system, on the effort that it takes for your body. I mean, think about it, just from a meat perspective, your body, you might be consuming that protein, but guess what? Your body is not using any of that until it breaks it down to the smallest molecule that it can in terms of those amino acids. So if your digestive system is not spot on, if your protease enzymes are not spot on and you're not in the pH zones that need to shift from digestion to the duodenum to all of this stuff, you're basically just going to barely absorb and use some of that. And then you have flesh of another being rotting in your system. So the point to all that is I'm not here to slam meat. I'm just here to say, like, listen, the body, it takes a lot of effort,
right?
And things have to be dialed in. You could have a stressful day and eat a steak and your body's like, I can't do anything with it. Like,
right.
So it's effort. It's a lot of effort to find it in nature, and it's effort to break it down, which is why most cultures, they're consuming 15% protein-ish with all the longevity zones. The people are living the longest at the highest capacity of life, meaning that they're running and walking until they're not in nursing homes
for 20 years. Right.
Exactly. So
every time I read your book, I think I would like to try, because I've never tried going vegan. I eat mostly vegetables and humanely raised meat and wild caught fish, but I've never really fully tried going full vegan. And every time I read your book, it just, cause it makes sense. Like I always, when I talk about it, it's like, go back to how humans have, like the whole feasting and fasting, like we have two different energy systems. And I don't believe that we were meant to eat every 3 hours all day, every day.
For sure.
Because humans haven't done that for 2.5 million years, right? And evolutionary speaking, it makes sense. We didn't always have access to eat meat every single day, but we did have access to plants and nuts and seeds and seasonal fruits.
And they show more and more that our ability to move around and walk, it's part of our biggest skill to hunt, but it's also our biggest skill to forage.
Yep.
And that's why 3,000 plants a year we were getting exposed to, as opposed to 30 right now. That whole process is completely changed. So again, yeah, I mean, and that's why I think, which is the beautiful side of also, intermittent fasting and kind of going that came out of the observation of nature. It came under the stress of like, we don't have food.
Right.
We need to go find it. Yeah, right. We need to go find it. So there's a few days that we're going to not have food. And then your body naturally kicks into that secondary mechanism and ketosis and ketones and all of that stuff. Great. And the cell death and the recapitulation of all of that stuff, that is one of the greatest healing things you can do is fasting.
Right.
But living in the stress is not, living into that zone. Like, again, there's research for ketosis and for ketones and all of that stuff. I get it. But living as a lifestyle into those things, that's where it's a very tricky, and the research isn't there. I've talked to the top people and you're like, well, I get the pseudoscience part of it, but the research really isn't there from a long-term perspective. So I just go back to, I've been with tribes. I've been with these people. This is a natural part of it. And that seems to be, the intermittent cycle of food is there and it's not. Right. And obviously wild food, powerful plants, I just say, what I would say to you too, is like, at the end of the day, I just eat more plants. Just like whatever you want to do with your other choices, whatever, just eat good plants. And if you feel compelled to kind of give yourself a break from the maybe harder digesting, meat and stuff, then just do it for a day, do it for 2 days, do it for whatever. And it, at the end of the day, for my book too, the diversification is a really good principle for us to diversifying our food, diversifying our patterns, right?
Right.
This is what I eat when I wake up. This is what I like, shift it around.
Right.
The cool thing about Shakeology is so diverse in its complexity. You can just shift around when you're drinking it. Right. Sometimes I drink early on. I think for the first 5 years of playing with it, I drank it straight away in the morning. Yeah. And now I'm like, I kind of mostly fast. Yep. And at the end of the workout, Shakeology is like, it sings to my body. It's
right. I'm right here with you. Yeah. I pretty much, I fast. I do intermittent fasting. I do fasted workout. And then I break my fast with a Shakeology, but I mean, I put tons of frozen spinach and I try and supercharge the already supercharged plant-based Shakeology. So this is a good question, because if someone like me were wanting to experiment and try to see what I feel like and how my body, functions on a vegan diet or vegan way of life, the Baru nut, which when I first reached out to you, I'm so appreciative of you asking if you could send me some, but I'm like, I already purchased them. I'm already a fan, but can you explain to the listeners the Baru nut? So this is something that is it's so good, but go ahead and explain. I won't steal all your thunder.
Yeah. So the Barukas, which is basically our name for it now, because it's a standard that we created. So the story goes that I was in the Brazilian Amazon actually looking at different plants, different palm trees. And a Brazilian saw me post something. It was on Facebook. Like the bajillion messages I get, for some reason I saw that. And this was 3.5 years ago or something. And he was like, you know, and for him, he was starting to think about importing this special nut. And he was like, well, if anyone's going to know if it's doable, I'm going to reach out to this guy. I've never talked to him before.
Right.
And so he did. And he goes, and he just started off, do you know what this Baru nut is? And I was like, no. And I get excited because I love, you know, it's like, I can't know it all. It's impossible. Right. So he sent me a bunch of research. I started reading. He sent me samples. And then when I tasted it, I was like, after I had done the research of the micronutrients and the balance of this nut, the superiority almost in every category compared to other nuts, I was like, whoa. And then the taste.
It's so good.
How the hell can it be so nutrient dense?
Thank you.
And be so freaking good?
That was my first thought when I tried them.
Wow. Yeah. And so we got together and we started talking about it. And, you know, my first thing was like, this is all amazing, but I've been in situations where it's like, okay, but it's going to take $2 million to get a third world situation. So I'm like, we got to go. Like, I'm so interested. Let's go to Brazil. We got it. We got to see. And so we did. So the first time it was just a deep dive into the Cerrado, and it comes from the Cerrado, which is the Savannah south of the Amazon, this amazing Savannah about the size of 3 states in Texas. And it's severely under threat, more, dare I say, more faster than the Amazon itself. Wow. So it's being 70% of it has been destroyed in the last decade. And so it's, you know, the soy crops, corn crops, largely for cattle, the unsustainable growing of beef. And they're just stripping. I've seen the line of this beautiful forest and then the line where it's literally wiped out and there's a cow on it. And it's just like, I don't understand, because there's so much richness in this, and actually economy too. And so the Baruzeita tree, where the Baru nut comes from, is all over naturally. And it creates this little fruit about fits in the palm of your hand. It comes to maturity. It drops. You can't pick it early. So it drops. You pick it up. It's got a fruit layer on the outside. It's got a very hard shell. You crack the shell open and it's one nut per fruit. And this thing, and then we looked at historically, like, okay, what, again, I'm going back to how I like to look. It's like, okay, well, what's the history? How did they use it? Yeah. Because you're seeing it differently now. You're still seeing the indigenous people do it, but they're whacking it with a machete, a rock. It's very hard to break open. So they were like, there had to be an easier way, or else this would have been not something that anyone consumed. So what they used to do with the whole fruit is they would take it and throw it on the kind of the fire at the end of the night. And by the time they'd wake up, those embers and that stuff would roast the nut on the inside and make the shell more brittle to just pop open. And apparently, and so it turns out we've done a bunch of anti-nutrient tests, phytic acids, oxalates, all of that stuff. Come to find out super high in all of it in its raw state. And as soon as you roast it, there's no sign of anything. So we've seen no historical data of allergies. We can't come out and say we're the only allergy-free thing in the world or nut in the world, because, as you know, the cascade of allergies really has nothing, is less and less has to do with one thing as it relates the gut itself. So people could react to the nut possibly because they have all of these underlying issues. But we've had a lot of people who've been severely allergic and have tried Barukas and absolutely love it. So so that thing got my attention because it was high in protein from plant-based. It was all the amino acids, which is like, whoa, that's crazy. The antioxidants were comparable to a blueberry. It's like off the chart. The fiber was, 3 times higher than most nuts. And then we all need more fiber. That's obviously
especially in America.
Big time. And then the micronutrients, the calcium, the magnesium, the phosphorus, all these things were like, wow, this is literally. And then we tested it, compared it to other nuts, and we're like, in almost every category, it's superior. And it was like, holy shit. So, I decided I was going to get involved. We got a hell of a team. And the cool thing is we're directly connected to the indigenous people because we have tens of thousands of people that are collecting this and creating stable economy for them. And it's just, again, it's one of the greatest gifts of doing a conscious consumerism, in that we're providing something that are destitute in the middle of nowhere. And we are, I just heard a little Brazilian ad that we're putting out. You collect, we'll buy everything you have. And then have a tree planting situation where our goal next year is to plant 1 million trees. And the overall goal is 20 million trees to start reforesting this and giving the seedlings back to the indigenous people so that they can start, number one, they're collecting so they have financial security from what's around them, and then also planting so that when those grow, that we will buy that from them too, and to repopulate the Cerrado again. So this checked all the boxes for me. It just was, and then having gone down to Brazil, it's a very, very special situation.
So whether a superfood that you have found is ingredient in Shakeology or the Ultimate Reset products, or not related to Beachbody, ultimately all of these superfoods, you are going to the source and helping the local people keep their resources and ultimately not get taken advantage of by the middle party that is not always looking out for their best interest.
It happens a lot.
It does.
So many situations I'm coming down, I'm the only white person, and they've had a scenario of situations where that hasn't worked out. And so, we're really trying to prove the economy to them, the consistency to them. So literally when people are buying these things, the Barukas or whatever, that you're supporting the ecosystem. And for us, that ecosystem getting momentum is only then driving a positive outcome for the environment and for the people. And that again, in this point in my life, that is, you go back down to Brazil and you've absolutely affected tens of thousands of people.
That's pretty freaking cool.
It's amazing. And it's hard to build a business. It's hard. It's not easy. It doesn't just happen. So
Absolutely. So we are at an hour. I want to address some of the questions that were left for me to ask you on Facebook. I want to respect your time because I know that you said that you are limited on time. Okay, first things first, I want to ask about the fortification of the whey protein or the whey formulation of Shakeology. Why do you have to fortify?
In terms of what do you
so on the back of the whey formulation of Shakeology, you have all of the different vitamins because it has been fortified with vitamins, but the protein based, plant-based one doesn't. So why is that process even necessary?
Yeah. So it's been a choice that we made where, the whey formula, we decided to standardize some of the vitamins and minerals, and always backing it up in the latest research from the research that we've dug into, and we're updating it all the time. it's not that you're not getting vitamins, minerals from the vegan formula,
right?
But there's no way that you can put that on the bag because of the shifting botanicals. So we decided to do that, the whey formula that way, just so people could go, okay, I'm also getting my standardized vitamins and minerals. And we've just, we've approached it now and again to, like, Isabel and I we're happy with it. Yeah. For us, we always steer towards, just the natural. Right. But this was kind of like trying to, like, walk the best of both worlds, meaning that we're not formulating for ourselves, we're formulating for people. And we've done a lot of coach panels where people really saw that as a benefit. Right. And if that changes one day, then we'd be willing to change that. But it's a standardized way to get those additional vitamins and minerals, as well as whatever the formulas provide.
Okay. Makes sense. So I'm curious, what are your top 3 resources for your own growth and knowledge?
Oh, wow. God, it's changing all the time. I mean, I think lately, it's been the ability to talk to some of my mentors personally. Okay. Like, I had a good conversation with Dr. Zach Bush, who's doing a lot of regenerative agriculture. He's probably one of the smartest people I've met. I've talked to and read his book, Dr. Pollock. The fourth phase of water, which will blow your mind. Gerald Pollock, Dr. Gerald Pollock. And what other resources?
I got this question from someone that literally, she met you at Paleo FX this year. And she said that either this year or last year, she said she bent your ear for an hour. She was very appreciative of that, but she had so much, when she found out I was interviewing you, Erin was quite excited. So she is thirsty for knowledge, and, someone like you, I was like, oh, that's a good question. So,
well, and now, I mean, I've got a couple audiobooks that I'm reading, but what is it? One's on power versus force. And, like, I got a bunch of other stuff, not necessarily plant-based. But it is to a point where what I've learned the best is action. Yeah. When I've actually shown up, I've learned so much. I was in a PhD program that I dropped out of because I was like, I'm in a very unique situation. My ego doesn't need a PhD. No. So I just said, I'm traveling around the world every month, learning. So going to the research center in, Goa, in India. Yeah. It's like very special. And it was a great moment, but those are the things that I think now too, I'm shifting into having some of those extra. I'm actually building a podcast myself that I want to get some people that aren't even known, that have been a contributing factor to my life and are brilliant beyond measure. So I guess the biggest thing is, it's not a good answer for people, but just honestly speaking, it's continuously being involved with and around those mentors in my life, and also collaborating with them. Like, I've learned a lot about nutraceuticals as they relate to stem cells, because I'm involved with one of the top researchers in stem cells, Dr. Henry Young. So that to me, and it's how, kind of through life, we realize the best ways we learn. And to me, taking action and being passionate about stuff and throwing myself in getting involved in things, that to me is my greatest attribute.
Well, I will say one of my favorite things about having my own podcast is it gives me an excuse to be able to connect with smart people like yourself, who I learned from it like exponentially. So I'm sure that you, since you're about to have a podcast, you will take advantage of that big time as well.
For sure.
Okay. So if you had to choose your top 3 favorite superfoods, if you're on an island and you only had 3 to choose from, I know that that's a really hard question, but what would be your top 3?
It certainly, I mean, one of those 3 has to be moringa.
Of course.
It's the vitamin tree. I mean, it's providing so much. And that tree also, you can use the bark, you can use the flower, you can use the seeds, you can use the oil, you can use the drumstick, you can use all of it.
I didn't know that. Cool.
Oh yeah, the whole thing. So, oh man, and I mean, I'm a big fan of the adaptogenic world because we're all stressed out of our minds.
Yes.
So I would probably choose. I mean, this is just like easy, but I would choose chaga. I'm sure.
Moringa and chaga were the 2 I knew you'd say, but I'm curious about your third.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw you a different one.
Okay, I'm ready.
There is a fruit out of Peru that is one of the greatest tasting fruits. It is one of the most enjoyable fruits I've consumed in my life. Well, there's a couple, but I'll say this one first.
Okay.
But it is not known here as a taste or a flavor. It is here as a supplement, but it doesn't do it any justice. I've actually gotten some fresh, raw stuff. It's called lucuma.
Lucuma? How do you spell that?
Lucuma.
Okay. You definitely, I would not guess that. I don't even know what lucuma is.
Yeah, because I love it so much. Okay. If I'm on an island and I've got the medicinal qualities of moringa and then I can eat lucuma for the rest of my life, I'm good.
You're good.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like it almost looks like a little rounder avocado.
Okay.
It's got a couple seeds in it. And it's basically nature's yogurt. Like it's just this consistency, kind of butterscotchy flavor. And of any place in the world, usually chocolate and vanilla are the top 2 flavors. The only place that isn't the case is Peru, because lucuma is in the top 2. Really? Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to find me some lucuma then. Where does someone that lives in Chicago go to find lucuma?
Well, you can find it as powder.
Okay.
It does come here as powder, but it's really not gonna. But it's a little special little project I'm starting to dance around to see if I can get some fresh lucuma.
Okay. Do you think it would ever be added to the formulation of Shakeology?
We've tried. It's just not strong enough for the flavor, or for certainly the flavor. You would have to put too much in it, and it's hard to preserve what it actually is, which is why I'm only kind of now looking at it from a food perspective. It just doesn't carry over what it could as a dehydrated powder.
Gotcha.
So it's just, from my perspective, it's kind of like, nah, it's not worth, there's nothing wrong with the powder at all. Right. But
you miss out on the enjoyment of the actual fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be like the Barukas, like, let's just, leave out a bunch of the micronutrients and eat it. And it's like, well, why would I want to do that? Like, let's have it all, Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you one last question, because it is getting time that you said that you had to go. I'm just gonna have to ask you to come back, because literally I love talking to you and racking your brain. My one last question, though, that we'll wrap this up, is what do you say to the person that says, I don't need Shakeology?
Yeah. Well, I answer that from, depends on how long they want to sit down and talk about it, because
right.
because I understand their just knee-jerk reaction,
right?
Because they're trying, someone's trying to sell them something, or they're sharing something with them. They don't know enough. Like from the way I'll share it is, listen, we are in a modern day stressful situation, and our food is absolutely not what it's supposed to be in terms of its monocrop stripping. And even organic is just not at the micronutrient level that it could be. If we were permaculturing for biodynamically farming, if we were doing it ourselves, and that person is answering you because I live on a farm and I'm doing it all myself, then maybe that person doesn't need it.
Right.
But that's also a stretch, because there's medicinal plants in there. There's adaptogens. There's all kinds of contributing factors in there. So I would say, like, this is a delivery system of those medicinal plants, that micronutrient bath, that helping to steer your body towards that homeostasis because of the stress that your body's under stress. It needs more nutrients, but if you're eating less nutrients, then imagine what that scenario is.
Right.
So this is again, this came from that understanding of, like, what are we in? Let's just be real. What are we in and under as a society?
Yeah.
Okay. We know it. We know that we're under stress. We know that our foods, we're buying shit in packages. We're going to restaurants. Come on.
Yeah.
If you just look a little bit under the hood, our forefathers were foraging. They were diversifying. They were, micronutrient scavengers.
Yep.
And how do you expect the body to live optimally, to you to have the energy so you don't have to be dependent on your reaching out for coffee and Starbucks and stimulants and blah, 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 blah. So if those people are overweight and reaching for Starbucks, then your body is hungry, but it's starved from a nutrient profile. And you're probably stressed out of your mind. So adaptogenic herbs helping to modulate and regulate some of the body systems is a really good thing to consume over a long period of time. So there's a million different ways to answer that question. But certainly from an individual, you just ask them, well, what's your life like? How's your health? How's your sleeping? How's your, are you as strong as you want to be? Or you have the energy of when you're 18? Like, well, guess what? Like,
Right.
So.
Okay. And I love your answer when someone says objection to price. You're like, you can't afford not to. And it's so true.
I mean, it's like, again, if you understood the journey of each of these ingredients and what we're trying to deliver here. And this isn't, people make arguments for the weirdest things, and yet you make arguments. I don't know why people argue about their health. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then yet, if you open their cupboard, if you open up any sliver of their life and you're going, you spent $100 on a tchotchke that you bought when you were falling asleep at midnight. What are you talking about?
Yep.
This is your body vessel.
Yes.
This is the thing that is carrying you around for your life.
Yep.
Why are you compromising with stuff going in your mouth? That's crazy to me.
Or for parents and their kids. Like, I love the fact that you were like, people have no problem spending a ton of money on the latest, whatever for their kid. But then when it comes to what they feed their kid, your book is so well written. I'm a huge fan. Anytime, like I do a lot of team calls for other teams because I feel like, because I am a medical doctor who left Western medicine because I realized that I could help way more people, helping them, coach them with a healthier lifestyle. I'm using my platform to teach coaches what an amazing product just Shakeology is alone. And we've got so many other great products, but I always talk about your book. And I think that every single Beachbody coach that is doing it as a business needs to read your book without a doubt. So can you let the listeners know, the ones that are not coaches, because if you're not a coach and you don't know where to find him, shame on you. But for the ones that don't know where to find you, can you give them all your website and all of that kind of good stuff?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for all that. I appreciate it. And superlife.com is my current one. I'm switching over to just Darin Olien at some point .com. But SuperLife Living is my Instagrams and all that stuff. So, yeah, superlife.com as of now. And SuperLife Living is my things. And, you'll find me if you just type.
Yeah, you've got so many great videos and great interviews that people have interviewed you on. So I challenge everyone to just learn more. If this interview hasn't done anything but spike your okay, well maybe I was wrong to be closed-minded, especially my doctor friends. You guys, come on. If you really want to help your patients heal, help them and guide them in this direction. I'm just saying. So, Darin, you are an angel. I appreciate you. The network is so lucky to have you and Isabel Deichler as the co-creator of this amazing product. I appreciate you greatly. And we always end this episode, or the episode of Fitz and Healthy Podcast, by reminding them that they deserve to love the life that they live. And I think it kind of goes perfect with your super life living, right?
100%. Thank you very much. It was a blast.
Thank you, Darin. Thank you, guys. We'll see y'all next episode. I appreciate your time listening so much. If you enjoyed this episode of the Fitz and Healthy Podcast, can you please go do me a favor and go subscribe at whatever platform that it is that you listen to podcasts. Leave a review. We read every single review, and we appreciate the time that you take to leave your thoughts and opinions. Now, also remember, while I am a medical doctor, the information I provide here is not intended to provide medical advice or a professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or to any other individual. I am providing general information for educational and informational purposes only, and it is not a substitute for medical or professional care. You should not use this information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. The information I share is not intended to treat, cure, or diagnose any disease or medical condition. If you believe you have a medical emergency, just call 911 immediately or your physician. Now, enough of that medical legal jargon. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate your time. Now go live a fit and healthy life.